Hey, welcome back to another episode of Fellow Freaks, our exclusive interview segment for the Freaks of the Vine podcast. Be sure to watch some of our previously recorded episodes of Fellow Freaks, as well as Freaks of the Vine itself. And if you're going to start with any of those podcasts, I'd say maybe episode 19 or 17 come to mind. Our guest today attended high school in Edwards, California, where then attending the University of Texas, where he studied government with a minor in journalism. And in 1985, during his junior year in college, he began a startup publication called Heaven's Metal. What began as a fanzine, soon Heaven's Metal achieved more popularity and became an official professional publication with 5 full-time journalists. And Heaven's Metal grew in so much in popularity that it was sold in newsstands worldwide and achieved a regular subscription base of 15,000 and at one point up to 22,000 readers. Later changing the name to HM, our guest published it for 28 years total, selling it in 2013 to one of his top writers, David Stagg. HM and Heaven's Metal are still going strong today, covering the Christian hard music scene that spans metal, punk, rock, and alternative music. Married to his wife, Jen, and they have 4 children. He now works for the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, where he does writing, editing, and graphic design. He is still active at his band Lust Control, who have released 5 full-length albums and 3 compilations. And just as well, he is a published author of 5 books that range from sci-fi to children's books. Without any further ado, our friend and guest today, Mr. Doug Van Pelt. Doug, welcome, my brother.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate the introduction.
Absolutely. Well, you deserve it, man. You have been a man of many talents. And I don't mind saying that because you have. You wrote a children's book. This is great. So when did you do this, man?
I did that in the middle of writing my great American novel, which was called Desert High, which is about my high school experience. And in the process of writing that novel, the storyline for a children's book just came, and I kind of downloaded it on paper from my mind in about 15 minutes. And I spent the next 5 years looking for an illustrator to illustrate the children's book for me. And after a few false starts and a lot of failures, I decided, you know what? I can't find an illustrator to do it for me. I'm just going to illustrate it myself. And so I did. And so now I'm twice as proud of the book because I not only wrote it, but illustrated it. And it was a fun process to do.
Sure. That's fantastic. How fun. So how old is your youngest? I should ask you that.
I've got 4 kids. The youngest is 15, so coming up on the sophomore year in high school.
Okay.
And my oldest is 26.
Now, how long ago was this book published?
Let's see, 2014 maybe. So 8 years.
Okay. So your youngest was technically still a small child, pretty much 7, 8 years old when you probably really enjoyed that, I imagine.
It was funny. I never thought I would write a children's book. I've got 2 more in the planning stages right now, actually. But it's just a really cute story of a small bear who wants to be just like his dad, who's a professional wrestling bear. And so it's a story about him following his dream to try to achieve that.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Check that out. And it is titled, the full title is what?
Bobby Baby Bear.
Bobby Baby Bear. All right, everybody, check that out, especially if you have kids. Well,
yeah,
doing that. Well, it's funny because of all the interviews that you have done over the years. I imagine it's kind of weird that you're being interviewed.
I enjoy being on both sides of the microphone. I often joke around that I'd never met a microphone I didn't like.
Good. That's exactly right. Well, tell us, when you went from your first model of being, making this fanzine, and then it became actually a published work. Tell us the little transition. How did all that happen?
Well, first of all was just the idea. I was reading another fanzine called Acme back in the winter of 84, 85. And Acme stood for Alternative Christian Music Enthusiasts. And in the news section, they mentioned something about some Christian hard rock or metal band. And they said in passing, with the advent of Christian metal, somebody should start a Christian heavy metal fanzine. You could have a lot of fun along the way and meet some needs. And the idea struck me, and I was like, I'd like to do that. And I prayed about it, sought counsel from friends. And one of my buddies, Kerry Womack, who's the singer for One Bad Pig, hadn't formed the band yet. He was going to the Cornerstone Festival And he said, "Hey, why don't you print the first issue of this publication you're talking about, and I'll hand them out as a promotion." So that was kind of the push out the front door that got me to put together that first issue. And I didn't have any investment capital, so it was very crude. It was like Scotch taped together, typewriter written, and photos using double sticky tape put together as a master, taking it down to a local Kinko's copy shop to make copies of, and folded it in half and stuck them in envelopes. The first issue, even though it was crude, I had a vision that this would be a magazine someday, and it would be on the newsstands next to Circus, Hit Parader, and Cream and all that. So I took it really seriously. And even that first issue, which was only 6 pages, had 3 photographs, and they were all Stryper. It was organized kind of as a magazine. I kind of had a vision, small beginnings, but had organization to it. I had like news to report, had a list of albums that people should check out in the first issue. And what's funny is that my friend who took it to Cornerstone, him and his buddy were so embarrassed by the low quality of it that they kept it in their suitcase the whole time and only handed out about 2 copies. I think Glenn Kaiser was a guy who got 1 copy of that first issue. But I took out some classified advertising in CCM magazine and Kerrang, secular heavy metal magazine in Great Britain. And it took off. People started subscribing. I traded advertisements with other fanzines like The Cutting Edge and The Advocate and Cornerstone magazine. And it just grew and grew and grew and grew. And I didn't, like I said, I never had any investment capital. I only grew as I could afford to grow. But eventually cash came in, and it got better and better as I had more time and money to put it together, make it look nicer.
Well, a publication that had an entire country and really world finally getting a chance to have something that they called theirs. I think that's it's kind of funny because I always told people that metal or rock fans, especially harder fans, it seems to be more of a community. I remember the last time I was in a metal band for quite a while, and I bring this up just to share this point. My son and I played in a band. Our last show together, and that was because I had started to study to become a pastor 7 years ago, and I was like, "There's no way I can do this. I can't do all this between my job and study." So our last show was at a bar, and there was 3 bands, and we were one. And at the end of the night, the owner and the waitresses said that it was one of the most fun nights they'd ever worked because everybody was kind, everybody tipped well, and everybody was very easy to get along with. And that's what metal does. I think there's sort of a brotherhood and sisterhood in the hard music that brings people together. And I think that's where your magazine began to really blossom, because I think especially for those of us who were believers and loved hard music, we finally had something to give us to feed our hunger. And it was just fantastic. It was magnificent, man, what you did with that.
It was really cool. It was I just credit God and his ability to give us creativity, because the idea was just like a great idea. Christian heavy metal, heavy metal and Christianity really go well together because they're both passionate, extreme, and dynamic stories and genres. So they fit really well together. And like you said, heavy metal is kind of like a language that people speak at certain generations. It spans generations now, but it's very, very much a community. And so it was really cool to see that take off.
Sure.
And it was obviously a good idea. And one thing I learned, and one of the teachings that kind of guided me, is I felt like a disciple. When he sees a need, he meets it. If he sees somebody that's hungry, he feeds them. If they're naked, he clothes them. And so there was a need for a Christian heavy metal magazine, and it became kind of a rallying point and a community of sorts, kind of a virtual hangout before the word virtual took on digital and electronic means. It was a place where people connected.
Yeah, amen.
And that helped.
Who was your first big interview?
First big interview. That's a good question. Well, probably Stryper, and that was even before Heaven's Metal came out. I went to school at the University of Texas, and they did their first tour outside of California in the springtime, springtime of 1985. And they came to Austin, and the local school newspaper, the Daily Texan, which had a circulation of over 50,000, because they had 50,000 undergrads there, asked me to do a feature story on them. So not only did I do an interview, but I incorporated it into a feature style article where you have some narration and quotes and narration and quotes, and it flows. So I had a chance to do that with Stryper and got to hang out with them that day when they were setting up for their big show at the Austin Opera House.
Was that in
a great concert?
Black Attack?
Yeah, they these Soldiers Under Command had not come out yet. It was going to come out soon, but yeah, it was their first tour outside of California.
Okay.
They came to Texas and did 5 shows.
Still going strong, and Michael still sounds just as wicked as he did back then. I'm blown away. His voice is so strong, and some of the things that he has done outside of Stryper, he worked with George Lynch, a little project they did together, and yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, there's a new band that he's in called Iconic with Joel Hoekstra on guitar, and it's really good too.
Okay.
Super musician, creative guy. He's definitely doing what God created him to do. Yeah. And we're all the better for it. It's kind of cool.
He's an excellent producer too. He has really good chops at production, and so very cool. You, during your time with Heaven's Metal, and you eventually changed the name to HM to kind of incorporate and hard music, obviously, because it wasn't just when you heard Heaven's Metal, I think there was an association with hair band metal. Was that kind of accurate at that point?
Yeah, at the time, Heaven's Metal was 10 years strong, was about to go into our 10th year anniversary year. And I was at Frontline Records. Frontline Intense Records was a label out in the West Coast in Newport Beach, California. And I made a deal with them where I was putting together video magazines, like a VHS tape magazine style format show, a 60-minute show. And I needed some place to edit these things. They had like a video editing suite. And I came over one weekend and spent midnight hours, working through the night in exchange for giving them some advertising space and credit for, they were one of the chief advertisers of my magazine. So I was in there one night editing a segment on Mortification, probably, or Precious Death or some band like that. And Michael Sean Black, one of their employees, came in, said hello, and he said, you should change the name of your magazine to HM. And it was funny. I got so angry inside. I kept it internally, but I was just very offended by that idea. But it did make sense because people from Australia and England, they like to abbreviate things. Instead of saying university, they say uni. And instead of relatives, they say reli. And so people were often writing me letters to the editor, and they would reference Heaven's Metal as HM. Thanks for the new issue of HM, blah, blah, blah. So people were already thinking of it as HM. They were already abbreviating it. And one reason why I was so offensive is the name Heaven's Metal seemed like such a perfect God-given name for Christian heavy metal, sure. Heaven's Metal. And so changing that, a foundational part of the magazine seemed so foreign and antithetical to what I was doing. But the more I thought about it, it made sense. And at the same time, it wasn't the word heavens that was offensive to our business aesthetic. It was the word metal. And at that time, 1995, Nirvana had come, and the new music revolution had happened, and entire record labels dismantled their metal divisions. Entire radio stations dismantled their metal format. Entire retail stores dismantled or reduced their heavy metal section. Yeah. So metal was shrinking. Commercial metal was dying a commercial death. And all the creative bands, or the only creativity that was really sparking at that point, was death metal and grindcore and black metal and
new metal is coming out of that a little bit. So
yeah, it's not very commercial. So heavy metal was dying a commercial death at the time, and the word metal in our name was hurting us as far as advertising sales potentially. So with the 10th anniversary issue of Heaven's Metal in July of 95, I thought, okay, this is a really good bookend. And so we changed the name to HM in the next 2 issues in September, October, and November, December of that year. I had a new logo, HM with an oval.
I remember
right
that.
Above it, it said Heaven's Metal in real small print. So it gave people a couple issues of transition to the new name So HM could still stand for Heaven's Metal at the time. But I tell you what, the backlash I received from
I was getting ready to
metalheads,
ask you that, brother.
it was tough. I mean, they hated me. They thought I was betraying an entire genre by turning my back on metal and being like Judas Iscariot or something. And it really wasn't the truth, because we covered metal. Anything that was guitar dominated, we still covered that, and we majored on that. But, you know, hard alternative bands like Stave Zaker, maybe Focused, and hardcore hybrid bands, as well as metal bands we were covering. And we got into a little bit of college rock and indie rock and some lo-fi stuff. But predominantly it was always loud and heavy and guitar oriented.
That's
so we stayed true to that. And one of the reasons why is because me and my fellow employees were passionate about the music. We liked what was being created then, now, and in the past. And that came through in the writing. And I think the enthusiasm helped us. But that was a tough transition to go through. It was really hard.
Imagine. And I was one of those people. I remember my brother-in-law played for me. It was literally out for like 3 weeks. He played for me the song off of Nevermind by Nirvana. Obviously, It Smells Like Teen Spirit. But I remember him playing for it. And he looked at me, he goes, "This is going to change everything." I'm not even kidding you. There's like 3 of us sitting there listening to him, and we're like, "What's wrong with you?" But he was right, because it was something nobody had ever heard before. But what's really interesting about that entire time, and as I told you, I did a radio program from 94 to 2001, and we started it at, Saturday nights, 2 hours. And we started to do, actually, we were an hour, then we got given an extra hour because it's late at night, and they didn't think anybody was listening anyway. But we wanted to do something outside of and I told this to Christopher Scott a couple weeks ago in an interview. I said, there's no offense to White Cross. Scott Wenzel's great dude. Love Rex, all these guys. But they wanted us, and we wanted to. There was so much music coming out at that time. And you're well aware of this. I mean, the transition of music that was going on, not just the transition from getting away from like hair bands. I'm talking about the sheer, think about what REX Records did at that time. I mean, obviously they originally signed Sixpence None the Richer, who, they had some of the best music early on before they hit stardom. But you had groups like Leader Dogs for the Blind, One and Done, Lyndon Perry's still around. That was an amazing album, Lemonade. It was unlike anything anybody had ever done. Precious Death was by themselves. Scattered Few was different. And then you went into the deathcore stuff, and nobody had done it better than Living Sacrifice. Obviously, I mean, there was so many bands that, and then I just interviewed also, we did Monty Colvin from Galactic Cowboys, and they were superb on their own right. All of these bands, all of this really, we were living at a time at that point where Christians were authoring the genres of hard rock music, and nobody knew. We can go back and see it now. Yeah.
Bands like Zayo were breaking molds, and other bands look up to them and mark them as a inspiration. Bands outside of our scene.
Absolutely. There's a documentary that Living Sacrifice as a band did, and it is not available. It was done. I think they pulled it. I don't know why. I can't find anything on it. But there were some sort of teasers that were out about it, and they were secular artists that talked about how much Living Sacrifice had an impact on them. And,
wow!
So it's really, really cool to see what it did. You broke 2 huge stories back in the day, and one of them was obviously with King's X and Doug Pinnick, which I thought was, by the way, one of the hands down best written articles I've ever read in a magazine. And I mean that sincerely.
Wow.
I remember reading that. I was a journalism freak and geek in high school, and it never carried on after that. I'm doing this, but that's different, but authoring. But I remember reading that article, and how you presented it was probably one of the best reads I ever did. It was phenomenal. And then the other one was Alice Cooper, when he actually admitted that he was a believer. And I thought you broke stuff that nobody else had done. So kudos to you, brother, for being so willing to take on and tackle a nation.
Thanks. It was funny that before the Alice Cooper cover story happened, I had to convince my staff. I had a staff of 5, and 4 of them were against the idea. It's like, no, he's old. He's like from a previous generation. This is we're a modern music magazine. He doesn't fit. And I told them, no, this is important. he's old and he's got history behind him. And finally, my managing editor was pacing the floor, and he said, "You know what? Doug's right, and we're all wrong." And so they gave me the green light to do the story. And it was like an hour and 45-minute phone call interview. It was like a really long one. It was really good. It was definitely a highlight. It was really an honor for him because he chose us to kind of break the news that for the first time in media, that he was a born again believer in Christ. And so that was a real honor that he trusted us to tell that story.
I two small things about Alice Cooper that a lot of people don't know. He was a preacher's child. And so there was a lot of rebellion, and he was years of doing that. And the other thing is, I had a friend of mine in 1999, we were doing this little musical project together, and he's an atheist. And, he always kind of ribbed me about my belief and faith in Christ, but he was respectful. And he told me one day, he goes, "Hey, I'm his hero since he was 4 years old was Alice Cooper, always has been, had all of the records, all of the actual vinyl records, everything he'd ever done." And he said, "Hey, I'm going to go out and get a chance to meet him, but I have to go to his Bible study. Figured you'd probably like to hear about that." And I laughed. I was like, because Alice he would talk to fans, but you had to attend his Bible study. And
cool.
It was so cool. And so that was back in, and that's of course, and obviously in Arizona where he's residing. But
yeah,
your feature in your magazine, it's what so and so says, is one of the coolest ideas that anybody I think could have ever done. And it was really, I sold people on the idea of subscribing to HM Magazine because of that series that you did. Would you please tell our fans what that was and what you did with it?
Cool. Yeah, it really took off, and I can't claim the idea on my own. Cornerstone Magazine, the people who put on the Cornerstone Festival and Jesus People USA, the Resurrection Band, they had interviewed a couple, secular rock stars. Like at one point they interviewed Ozzy Osbourne, and they gave him a copy of Mere Christianity during the interview. And they even told the story about meeting Robert Plant and saying, "We'd like to interview you, Robert." And he goes, "Okay, give me your phone number and I'll call you." And as they were walking away, they thought, he's never going to call. And so they ignored the opportunity, and he called when they weren't there and left a voicemail. I was kind of perturbed that they weren't around to do the interview. But anyway, so they talked to mainstream artists about faith. And so I started doing that. One thing that was cool is, Heaven's Metal was growing. It was sold on newsstands everywhere. And we became, we got on the list of publicists everywhere. We were a media outlet, just like, Spin and Alternative Press, who both started in 1985, by the way. So all three, and Metal Edge, all started that year.
Really? I didn't know Metal Edge did too. That's great.
The publicists would send us media kits. So I would get something on Bang Tango or Metallica or Kansas or whoever. And all I would have to do is just respond to the press release with the phone number to call or email to contact the publicist. "Yeah, I'd like to do an interview with so-and-so." And so they would set it up, and it happened. And so I kind of early on, I latched onto the two most important questions anybody can ever hear in their lifetime, I think. And that is, what do you think of Jesus Christ? Which cuts through religious baggage. I'm not asking you, what do you think about organized religion? Or what do you think about church? Or what do you think about priests? Or what do you think about youth groups? I'm just kind of bypassing that and going straight to the man. What do you think about Jesus Christ? And then the follow-up question to that is, what do you think about his claims, quote, "to be the way, the truth, and the life? No one comes to the Father but by me." And so by his very words, if you attribute the quote as being accurate, which I do, it's hard to wrestle with that. Either he's telling the truth, which means you should bow down to him, or he thinks he's God, he's a lunatic, he's crazy, belongs in a mental asylum, or he's a liar. Yep. And if he's a liar, please don't call him a good prophet or a good teacher, because good prophets and good teachers don't lie.
You're a good C.S. Lewis fan too. That's something that we all, that's the big, yeah. Very well said.
Dude is awesome. And so that question, usually it came out of left field. They weren't expecting it. It was in the middle of the interview. And I tried to always choreograph my phone interviews as if it was a live TV or radio interview. I didn't want to lose the conversation midstream. So sometimes I would organize where I asked that question. Sometimes I rearranged the order of my questions on the fly based upon what was happening in the interview. And I would also have kind of a couple of easy questions. Like every guitar player probably wants to hear the question, what would Jimi Hendrix be doing now if he was still alive? It's a question that intrigues guitar players. And so I would have questions like that right after the Jesus question, just in case it got dicey and they got really offended, like Tommy Victor of Prong or Henry Rollins, or some other folks that just didn't really like talking about religion. I could follow up really quick with another question, and then maybe try to worm my way around to getting to the topic of religion again. And so anyway, it became a very popular part of the magazine. People would turn to that first when a new issue arrived in the mail. And people often suggested, you should put these together in a book. So I've done over 100 of these type of interviews. And so I did. I got published with relevant books called Rock Stars on God, with the idea of doing several volumes. Yeah. And volume 2 is out now. It's available on my website, Rock Stars on God, volume 2. Volume 1 took the most popular names like Alice Cooper and Kiss and Metallica. I wanted volume 2 to be the best interviews, because the biggest name doesn't always mean the best interview or the best read. So I handpicked 25 interviews from my catalog to put together volume 2, which is out now.
Fantastic. That is fascinating. I remember what I loved about it was that you didn't edit them.
Yeah.
When you asked Tom Kiefer, that was one that always stuck out to me. And it was like, paraphrase it, but you know where I'm getting at here. So Tom, what do you think about Jesus Christ? Yeah. So I'm not really into religion, but I mean, yeah, he seemed like a good dude. And a lot of ums. And you would those. And that's what I loved about it, because it was like, this is how people react. You know, we always talk about, you can walk into a room of 20 people and say, God's awesome. You're going to get some nods. People kind of look at you weird. You walk into that same room and you say the name above all names, and you say, Jesus Christ is awesome. You get people wanting to beat you. And it is no different. You know, I teach apologetics, and we talk about it. How do you work conversations? Because you're talking about our King of Kings. And so you've got to work through how people respond and react to that. You don't dull it down, but there's a way to bridge the gap. And you have done such a magnificent job of that over the years. So nice job, brother. Nice job.
Thanks for the encouragement. I kind of developed my own definition of what a Christian journalist means. I was doing a cover story on a Christian heavy metal band that was going to kick in the doors, called Rage of Angels. And the band was courted by all the major labels. One of them was Myrrh Records. And the A&R guy from Myrrh Records flew out to hang out with the band, and he was smoking cigarettes and drinking beers with the guys in the band. So they let down their hair. They kind of freely talked with him. And so at the end of a couple of days, they said, so what do you think? What do you think? And he goes, well, you guys aren't ready. We're going to have to send you to like Last Days Ministry School, teach you about discipleship, and get you ready for a ministry, a public ministry. And they were like, oh, screw you. Get out of here. We let our hair down. You made out to be something, and now you're not, blah, blah, blah. You just set us up. And they were furious with him. So I called up Mark and said, so what's your take on this? He goes, well, Doug, I was smoking. It was kind of a dark period in my life, and it's really embarrassing. Could you please take that out of the article? So I had to wrestle with that. You know, a journalist holds the truth as the highest standard, but a Christian, what does it mean to be a Christian journalist? And I thought of the story of Noah. When he came back after the flood had subsided, he grew a vineyard, grew some grapes, made some wine, got drunk, passed out naked in this tent. His youngest son came in and saw his dad passed out naked in the tent, went and told the other two brothers, hey, guess what? I saw Dad. He's naked. The other two brothers walked in backwards, and they carried a blanket and they covered their dad. And when Noah woke up and had his wits with him, he was very, very, very mad at the young son for exposing him. And he honored the two sons. So I thought, you know what? A Christian journalist is one who won't destroy somebody's life for the sake of a story. He'll elevate the truth, but at the expense of somebody's life or somebody's well-being, he's going to take that into consideration. So I kind of developed my own standard of what a Christian journalist was. And funny enough, in that story, I didn't honor Mark's request to take out the smoking and the drinking, because it made such an important part of the story. I don't think it ruined his life. But it helped me define what a Christian journalist is. And another thing too, like with the King's X story, one of the reasons why, this sounds braggadocious to say that, but one of the reasons why I might have been the best person to break that story is because I'm friends with the band. And I care about
resonated in the article.
Yeah. And so it's like, if somebody wants to talk to me about some celebrity's faith in Christ, or talk to him as if he's a commodity, like they can talk trash about him and put him down. It's like, well, okay, let's talk about your mom, dude. That's the way I feel. And I think it kind of helps people realize I'm going to show respect for my friends, and I'm not going to talk about their faith and their personal life as if I own them. I'm going to treat it with care and dignity. And so that kind of shaped my journalism and how I approach celebrities as well as my audience when I wrote.
That's well said, but that shows you why it lasted, because you're a man of integrity. And that's what people of integrity do. They're never going to cut the legs out of somebody for their own, for their own gain. But at the same time, you've got to hold a level of honesty. And that's what, the Holy Spirit discerns through us how to navigate and handle that. And you clearly had. And yeah, nice job, man. That's a reason why it lasted and is still going. You got rid of it in 2013, correct? You sold it to your former writers.
Yeah. He was one of my senior writers, and he lives in Houston. And I told him, hey, do you know anybody? He's a businessman, very savvy. Do you know anybody who might want to buy a magazine? He's like, what? Let's talk. And, and we pursued that together.
Good for you.
So he's still carrying that on, and I can write for HM when I feel like it. And so both Heaven's Metal and HM are kind of hobbies for me now. They're not my main gig. They don't make an income from them. But it still allows me to write about something that I like when I get the unction to do so.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it's kind of fun. What
was your most uncomfortable moment have you ever done doing an interview? Who was it with? Can you share?
Henry Rollins was probably it. And that interview is in Rockstars on God Volume 1, which you can still find on Amazon. The relevant books went out of print a few years after and released me from my contract. So I've got volumes 3, 4, and 5 ready to come out sometime in the future. But it was funny. One of my buddies, my managing editor at the time, was really nervous. And he was actually pacing the floor of the office. Henry Rollins is a tough interview. I'm worried. And I was like, I've done hundreds of these before. And I was like, chill out, dude. It's no big deal. One of the mistakes I made, though, is we had a mutual friend, my managing editor and I, who was like a Henry Rollins expert. And I emailed him a couple of days before the interview. And I said, I'm going to be interviewing Henry. Do you have any questions I should ask him? And he sent me about half a dozen questions that were really good and insightful. Somebody that is an expert on the guy would know. But I didn't reword the questions into my own language, which I should have. And one of the questions was, how did you get rooked into hosting that show on USA Network? You do a really good Rod Serling, by the way. And he's like, what did you mean by that? How did I get rooked into it? Are you flippant blankety blank or what? And he was ready to, reach through the telephone and grab my neck. I could feel his arms around my neck a couple of times. So I brought up one of his friends that died, which was one of my buddy's questions. I brought up, how did he get rooked into hosting that show? And then when I brought up Jesus Christ, all 3 of those times it was very tense. And he was like calling me pal and goes, here, this interview is going to end in a minute, pal, if we don't change the questioning here and stuff. And one thing that really bugged me about Henry Rollins, as well as Dave Mustaine of Megadeth, who's a believer, is both of those treat journalists like they're dogs. They're very much on guard. They weren't friendly. And it's like, I've seen both of those guys with microphones in their hands, like on MTV, interviewing other people. So I'm thinking to myself, you've been in my shoes. Why don't you care about, show me some empathy here.
Right.
But they've been burned so many times by journalists that
that's exactly right.
They kind of hate him, or they have a mistrust.
Somebody had asked Dave Mustaine about that more recently. And I think there was a real understanding that when he came out with a couple of their best albums for Megadeth, it was right when Metallica, his first band, obviously his former band, had come out with something. And there was no chance of Megadeth getting the notoriety that particular time. I mean, but it is what it is. And Uncle Dave is an interesting cat, isn't he?
Yeah.
But he is a fellow brother in Christ. And so,
good guy, a little rough around the edges.
It is,
but you got to appreciate.
I want to head to the end of this in respect for your time. If you don't mind, I got my final four quick questions and then a very final thing to ask you. So I'll kind of rapid fire these if you're all right with that.
Let's go.
All right. What is your favorite genre of hard rock metal? Like if you had to pick one deserted island that you're going to listen to, what's one genre that you can't live without?
Gosh, that's a tough question because I like so many different genres, but I love melodic metal. I love a melodic voice, whether it's Led Zeppelin, King's X, or Stryper, or Guardian. You know, there's this melody is kind of flows through all those. Even though King's X is very progressive, Led Zeppelin's kind of hard rock blues based, and Guardian's a little more melodic metal as well. Stryper. If I had to pick one, I would say melodic. It's always been melodic metal, but it would be hard to get by with just one. Yeah.
I think that. Favorite sport? Are you a sports
Football.
fan? Okay, you're a football
yeah.
fan. Okay, so who's your team?
The Dallas Cowboys.
Okay. Now, do you live in the Dallas area?
I live in Austin, which is about 2.5, 3 hours south of there.
Fair enough. Okay.
So I'm in the best place in the world for Cowboys football on TV because we never get blacked out in Austin. We see all their away games and all their home games. Whereas if you live in Dallas, if the stadium doesn't sell out, you might not get to see the game on TV.
I live an hour outside of Kansas City. I'm a Chiefs diehard.
All right. Great team.
Thank you. And we years of ridiculousness, but yeah, huge fan. And we don't get blacked out here in the capital city of Kansas. That tells you where we're at. So it's kind of cool.
Nice.
Which do you like doing the most? Talking politics or flossing?
Probably talking politics. I have a streak in me that likes to talk unfiltered and likes to maybe offend people or shock people. And so politics does that. It's both of those are uncomfortable. I floss every night. I use little flossers now, little plastic things that help you get in and out.
Where were they when we were kids? Where were they when we were kids? That's I think your stance on so many we see actually I know I see a lot of the stuff that you had posted on Facebook, and we completely agree on a lot of things. And I do believe it's really it's telling of your personality that you really engage people that don't agree with you, and you do it in a very soft way. And I think that's you really could teach a class on apologetics after all you've been through, man. You could really teach people how to defend their faith, but doing so in gentleness and respect. You have a gift, Doug. You really do. So nicely.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, brother.
What is the best place to eat in Austin? I'm a fatty, so I got to ask.
Anywhere in Austin is a great place to eat. A Tex-Mex place or a barbecue place. We got the two best kinds of food in the world. We got Tex-Mex, which is a variation of Mexican food that's a little more palatable, less saucy than traditional Mexican food. And we've got barbecue, like the Kansas City barbecue and the Tennessee barbecue and the pulled pork. Those are great, but the Texas barbecue is like brisket, and the barbecue sauce we use is just fantastic. So you couldn't go wrong with Rudy's Barbecue or Stubbs Barbecue in downtown Austin here.
Okay.
Or Lupe Tortilla or Cafe Serrano's for some Tex-Mex.
I'm going to disagree with you on Kansas City's bar. I mean, I'm just.
Well, have you had Texas barbecue? Have you had some brisket?
Yes, I have, and it's phenomenal. So I can't.
Yeah, it is.
I just have to hold, the fort. So I got to send you some Fiorella's Jack Stack barbecue sauce for you. Okay.
Oh, God bless you.
Just going to send you a rub and some sauce. And once you get it, you hold your stance on Texas barbecue. We're good with that, but I'm still going to get you some of this.
All right.
And in our closing words, I want to ask you this, Doug. If you would please share with the listeners, there's going to be people who know you and people who don't. If you would kindly just bestow some wisdom to them. It can be anything that you're passionate about, anything that you're thinking about or dealing with right now. Just whatever comes to mind when the Holy Spirit kicks you, would you please just share as we let you have the final words?
I'd be glad to. One thing that some of us are weighted down with is trying to please our dad or please our mom or trying to earn love from God above. And it's not necessary. I'm wearing some headphones right now, and this little wire is created to hold one thing. It's an electronic pulse that is taking the signal from my phone to my ears. It's created for that. And we were created for this type of life. The Greek word in the Bible is zoe. There's bios, which talks about physical life, like skin, blood, and bones. But zoe is like this abundant life that Jesus promised us. As I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And that abundant life is just, it oozes with grace. And God loves us so much that he gave his only son. That's how much we're valued. He didn't give us half his son or 25% of his son, or, oh, I saw what you did 3 weeks ago in Kansas City. You're going to get 65% of my love right now. And that's how much I value you based upon your worth and your performance. We don't have to perform for God to earn his love. Jesus took our failure on his back and he nailed it to the cross. And so the believer's rest, which Hebrews talks about, is knowing this and counting our strength as a loss. So we don't have to perform to get God's love. We don't have to manufacture or do enough religious good deeds to earn his favor. We have his favor. It's a gift. He looks down upon us like a parent looks down on their child, and with just so much affection. And they're leaning towards us. He wants to bless us. He wants to be with us. And so we don't have to carry around this performance mentality like we've got to be good enough. We have his pleasure. And so it's like if you were a kid that had a good, healthy dad like I did, who went to your ball games and said, "Way to go, Doug," that's how God's pleased with us. When Jesus got baptized, there was a voice from heaven that says, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." Can you imagine God telling you that he's well pleased with you? And I truly believe that that's the case. When we come to Christ, we receive his holiness. We've justified. The wages of sin have been paid for. We've met all the criteria because of who Jesus is. And so we get the benefits of riding on his coattails. And so we get all of that for free, and it can flow through us just like this electricity is flowing through these headphone wires that were made for one thing, to carry that abundant life. It's ours for the taking. It's ours for the asking. And so I just would like to encourage the readers that you don't have to perform for God. You don't have to be good enough to get God's pleasure. He's already pleased with you. And so approach him with boldness and authenticity and honesty. We blow it from time to time. And so don't fake it. Don't pretend. Fess up to it. And God's not cynical. He's going to approach you as someone who loves us and cares about the best for us and wants the best for us. So he's got our best interest in mind. So, don't hesitate to run to him.
You ever thought about preaching?
I love it.
That was great. That was great. That was some serious wisdom. Such a great encouragement today. And we need it. The world is what it is. It's always going to world. Culture's going to culture, so we got to remember sometimes the smallest points but are the greatest points. And adding on to what you had said, one thing is that's the beauty of the double imputation, that he imputes his righteousness to us. We impute our sin into him. And because of our faith in him and love for him, when we are welcomed, he will say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." What a beautiful, beautiful moment that will be. Brother Doug, we could talk forever, but I want to be respectful. You're on your lunch break. So thank you for taking the time with fellow freaks today, my friend. And if you hadn't had a chance, go back and check out, the guys, Chris Scott, Monty Colvin, and Jimmy Brown well, and they all know you. So we do those, moments of just letting them kind of get a chance to talk about their stuff. So, and I did not mention, and I failed to mention your band Lust Control. I checked it out on Spotify. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We're
writing
really
new songs.
Cool. Yeah.
We're putting together. It's probably going to be our last album right now. And the band's pushing me hard as a vocalist to really step up. And so we got 8 songs on an EP we're looking to put out hopefully early next year.
Okay. Well, it's been fun to listen to that. It's been great talking to you, Doug. You have left your imprint on believers everywhere, especially bringing relevancy to the Christian music that it needed to be exposed and shared with. And so going back, we'll definitely wrote that book title down. We will go back and we will get them today, actually. So thank you for your time. And it's been a pleasure, my friend.
Awesome. I enjoyed hanging out with you, man. We definitely could have done this for hours,
Absolutely.
Especially over some good barbecue.
All right. Yeah. So I'm gonna shoot you an email and get your address from you. By the way, I will promise to send you a rub and a packet of rub and barbecue sauce that you will be happy with. But I respect where you stand with your Texas barbecue.
Yep.
All right. Lord bless you, brother. And we'll talk to you really soon, Doug.
Thanks. God bless you.